Actually, I wouldn't have known that this was going on without your coverage in public, but it sounds very similar to, of course, what's been going on in the US with the Democrats' attempts to censor Twitter and then X.
Yeah, so I mean, the nature of the censorship that's occurring right now, it's hard to totally understand. I mean, we have what we know and then sort of what we suspect but can't prove, and then kind of theorizing what's happening. But we have uncovered definitely direct relationships between the United States government and intelligence agencies and the British intelligence and government agencies on censorship issues. We have seen direct relationship between the FBI and the Brazilian government on censorship and so-called foreign interference, but basically censorship of disfavored views. We have Soros and Omidyar. That's Pierre Omidyar, the founder of eBay, and has a big philanthropic network, but that their NGOs are basically doing the same thing that NGOs that they also fund are doing in the United States and Canada and in Europe. And so we see these NGOs behaving more like government actors, but they're supposedly non-governmental, but demanding censorship and then having some weird relationship with intelligence agencies that are not totally obvious, like former CIA people, former FBI people, former Department of Homeland Security people entering into these NGOs and then coming out of them, or academia, or getting DARPA money, which is Defense Department money. So we see military and intelligence people kind of playing in this space across countries. One of the big early censorship initiatives in the United States had a British Ministry of Defense, MOD person, working with a US DoD person, supposedly in a volunteer cybersecurity, but kind of anti-misinformation kind of front group, or, kind of fake NGO. And we see just really similar groups in Brazil, fact checkers associated with universities that are getting Soros funding, but also US Embassy funding. We see a group called Sleeping Giants, which is a lot like Media Matters, advocating for advertiser boycotts. I would say the differences are that the big difference between Brazil and what we're seeing in Europe and Britain and the United States and Canada is that it's coming not from the executive branch, which is where the censorship is coming from in those countries. It's coming from the Supreme Court, this judiciary, and ostensibly as a sub part of it, which is the elections court. But it's really the Supreme Court and this one guy, this just huge figure. I mean, people might have seen photos of him, and his name is De Moraes, and like Elon Musk will put up photos of him and compare him to Voldemort, or you see these photos of him, he looks a little bit like Darth Vader. Alexandre de Moraes, and de Moraes is this huge figure, and he clearly, there's just real rage in him and real anger that comes out, even hatred towards particular people saying certain things. He's very apocalyptic, very hysterical. I have to protect democracy from hate speech, from misinformation. So this picture of like, I'm going to protect democracy by censoring these disfavored views, which is very similar to as it is here. It's just, I would say in Brazil, like in the United States, if the censorship's at like 5, in Britain, it's at like, 7 or 8. In Europe, it's like 7 or 8. In Brazil, it's like 9 or 10, like all the time. It's just much more aggressive, extreme, angry. And Brazil's more, people that know Brazil know that it's just a more passionate, emotional culture and society. The men cry, and it's actually okay. Like it's a sign that you're a really full human being. It's very Portuguese in a kind of like that sort of like people know Portugal, but Brazil's very intense, and so they shout and they're screaming, and the politicians will wave guns at each other. I mean, people will get killed, right? It's like intense. So like that in that way. Yeah. On the other hand, though, they'll also be like, we're gonna have like a criminal investigation, and then like nothing will happen. You know what I mean? So it's like it can kind of go. That's why you're sort of like, is this real, or like, am I really at risk?
Or are they just being dramatic?
Are they just are they being drama queens because they're Brazilians?
And so President Lula, I mean, Is this sort of an ongoing, yeah, I guess what I'm wondering, is this sort of an ongoing trend in Brazil, or is this specific to the government that's in power right now and President Lula?
No, and sorry, I didn't really quite finish because there's so many digressions in that. But
Okay, sorry.
basically, Lula is so the guy before Lula is a right-wing populist named Bolsonaro, and Bolsonaro is just very similar to Trump in so many ways, like
Mhm.
personality. Um, like his son at one point called him a redneck. He called his own dad a redneck. More crude than Trump in the sense that Trump was still a kind of New York businessman. He was too crude and vulgar for the professional managerial class, obviously, in the United States, and is the vulgar nature of Trump. But all that vulgar nature was in Bolsonaro, but also populist, even maybe more so. And just absolutely freaked out the establishment. I mean, just absolutely freaked out the establishment. So you see a reaction to Bolsonaro, you see a reaction to Trump, Brexit, the election of Duterte in Philippines, you see a very similar systematic establishment anti-populist reaction that then has the very similar mobilization in what they're going to do. We want to stop those populists from going viral. We want to shut down their social media. We want to make them scared of sharing things online. Ultimately we want to ban or just deplatform them, but only if there's not like a backlash. They're more careful around that in the United States than they were in Brazil. So it's an anti-populist movement, and it's not. I mean, it's like, how coordinated is it? Seems pretty coordinated. I mean, they definitely, like, if you look at World Economic Forum, just to take one forum for this, World Economic Forum has been about misinformation and censorship and hate speech and all this for years. I mean, most recently they said it's the biggest long-term, medium to long-term problem, or do they say short-term? I can't remember. But the United Nations has meetings on this. World Economic Forum. I mean, I think if you go and find funding probably from Gates Foundation. So there's the elites and the establishment have been pushing this for a long time, even
Yeah.
before 2016. But you get to the populist revolutions of 2016 of Trump and Brexit, and then I think Duterte and Bolsonaro are both in 2018, and you just see the establishment is like, we have got to get control back of social media. And it seemed like they were getting it. And then Elon takes over X, and it was just like, at that point, and then Facebook sort of throttles news. And at that point, I think the elites are still in a state of absolute panic. I think they can't stand that they don't control Twitter anymore,
Yeah.
and that it's still the best platform for news,
Yeah.
and they can't stand that, and they just hate it. And so that's why we see a story like every day, it seems like, on Elon Musk and how terrible he is and why he's a threat to democracy and all that.